Welcome, everybody. This is Buck Joffrey with the Wealth Formula Podcast. And before we begin, I'd like to begin by reminding you there's a website associated with this podcast that you should consider checking out. It's called wealthformula.com. There is a plethora of resources there, and you should check that out. You can get a copy of my free book, 7 Secrets of Eternal Wealth. There's all sorts of other downloads on there, too. You can check it out, though. You can also simply text me at 44222 and type Wealth Formula, one word. And if you do that, you'll get a free copy of that book as well. And I also want to remind you that there is an accredited investor group that it's associated with Wealth Formula. It's actually associated with me. It just, this is where I am, and I'm talking to you on the Wealth Formula Podcast. If that's of interest to you, definitely, go to wealthformula.com and click on Investor Club. I got to get to know you before you're really part of the club. So there is a process involved, but we're doing lots of cool stuff there. So check that out if you have not done so already. Again, wealthformula.com. Now, this is actually my first recording since the 4th of July holiday. Actually, the podcast was done before the 4th, but then I took off, and now I'm recording this intro. And I got to tell you, I love getting together with family and watching fireworks and all that stuff. I love the 4th of July, that's for sure. But the thing that I always feel like is as I'm getting older, it reminds me of the fact that I was born with an incredible advantage that the vast majority of you were born with as well. And that is the opportunity to grow up as an American. And do not underestimate that, what that means. I am 2 generations away from poverty in India. My dad came to this country in the late 1960s as a talented engineering student on a scholarship. He, of course, was before long possessed by this American spirit that I think is really the entrepreneurial spirit, and went on to become a millionaire. He took his lumps and his ups and downs, but that's what he did. And he came from a family that literally did not have, enough food to eat at times. And then look at me now, talking about wealth, my grandparents' generation barely was able to scrounge up enough food. A buddy of mine, and this isn't just about immigrants either. A buddy of mine grew up with, I want to say you said 6 siblings and a single mother, and they're on food stamps. And he was talking about how, there a lot of times there wasn't much food around, right? Sounds like a pretty dire situation. And now he's one of my good buddies here in Santa Barbara, and he's a millionaire entrepreneur. Where else in the world does this happen? Where else do we have such, social mobility? I mean, you can talk about how, the middle class is kind of shrinking in that, but we still are, heads and shoulders above other countries in opportunity. And look at the class system, right? We don't really have a class system, which is probably the biggest problem to social mobility. England, for example, still has something called the House of Lords. And that's part of their government, right? They have this branch of their government called the House of Lords. And in order to qualify for the House of Lords, you have to be born into, you have to be a lord. You have to be born a lord type, I guess. Or you have to be part of a lineage. I mean, seriously, come on. I mean, we've had, we got hillbilly Bill Clinton, Slick Willie, I actually like Bill Clinton, but that guy, man, alcoholic father raised by his mother. And then you got Obama, who, again, not being political here, but look at the guy's background, right? Father's a drug addict and leaves his mother, and then he's president of the United States. Yeah, we don't have the House of Lords here, ladies and gentlemen. We have United States of America. And sure, it's not a perfect system, but you know what? There is no other country in the world that provides the opportunity to its people the way that the United States does. And you can bitch all you want about this country. But remember, you can bitch about this country because you live here. And for those who I hear about this all the time, in this sort of podcasting circle about fleeing to other countries because you think the U.S. economy is going down. Well, good riddance if you go. I mean, do you really think that if the world goes into financial meltdown, that you will be better off anywhere else in the world than the United States? Do you think that hiding in a third world country will serve you better than being in the greatest country in the history of the world? Do you? Really? Good luck to you then. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you appreciate this country the way I do. We've got it good. And being an American is the biggest reason that I believe that no matter where you are today, I know you can be wealthy. All you got to do is just got to tap into that inner immigrant, because we're all immigrants. I'm just a generation away. Some of you might be part of that Puritanship, but you're still, you still had somebody in your lineage with the cojones to get on a boat and leave and look for better things, right? Just tap into that inner immigrant and let it flow. Look at the opportunities around you. The only thing stopping you is fear of the unknown. Sometimes it's the fact that we have money, that we're so successful, we get the golden handcuffs. The truth of the matter is we just get fat, right? We're fat and happy. And that is, that's probably the biggest thing in your way. No one is in your way. You control your destiny, and that's what it means to be an American. And if you disagree, then that's great. Let me know. Go to wealthformula.com. Leave a message to me on SpeakPipe and speak your mind so that you can be on the next Ask Buck show, and we'll play it. But, well, speaking of Ask Buck, that was my lead in to this week's show, which, of course, is an Ask Buck show. And joining me will be Lane Kawaoka, because it's always nice to have somebody with you when you're answering these questions to get a different perspective. So when we come back, it is Ask Buck Week. All right, everybody, we are here back on Wealth Formula Podcast. We're doing something that we do once in a while. It's a little hangout with Lane Kawaoka, who I always pronounce Lane Kawaoka. and he never corrects me, but I heard him say Kawaoka once recently, and I was like, oh, okay. Sometimes it's like one of those things, right, Lane, where you don't want to, you've known somebody long enough, and you might forget their name, or you might forget something about them that's kind of embarrassing. I think that's kind of what happened. In this case, you just were kind enough not to mention it to me. So I appreciate that. So Lane, as a reminder, the podcast host of, what is that name of that podcast, Lane?
The Simple Passive Cash Flow. Simple
Passive Cash Flow. It's not difficult. It's not active, but it is cash flow, right? And so it's a good show. Check it out. A lot of engineers listening to it. A lot of how would you describe your audience?
I would say like IT engineer types. Definitely like guys who like to wear propeller hats and like to get into the numbers.
Yeah, get into the numbers.
Yeah.
Do you have or the people who listen to it, or would you call them people who are active investors, passive investors, people looking, I mean, because what we try to do here is try to bring, sometimes I think a funny way to describe the show would be figuring out how to make the rich get richer.
Right. I guess I would say, we're kind of like the nouveau rich, right? Like a lot of these guys, they make $150,000 right out of college, and they're going to be accredited for sure. I mean, well before their 40th birthday. But it's
What is 40 old or something? Is that what you mean by that?
well, when you're 25, it is. And you're working for Amazon, you're making $120,000 for some marketing degree. It is.
Right. That's true. That is indeed true. So today, we were going to do part of what we're going to do is an ask Buck show here, and it's always fun to do that with Lane rather than without Lane.
Yeah, it's a little awkward reading those questions by yourself, huh?
Yeah, it is a little bit awkward. And so, Lane was kind enough to step in and chat. And it's also nice to get a little bit more follow-ups and stuff because, you can get one question, may not be quite answering it from the full, 360-degree angle. But so what have you been up to? Tell me what you've been up to.
I just finished a couple raises for a couple apartment deals, so filled that up, and then
what kind of buildings were these?
Class C value add multifamily, 114 unit type.
Yeah, and where were they?
One was Atlanta and one was Huntsville. So one kind of interesting thing is, nobody's really looking in Dallas these days unless you want to kind of bang your head against the wall. So everybody's kind of scattering to DFW, Houston, and then other parts of the country. I think Atlanta's going to be coming on strong here in the next year or two.
Atlanta's been strong for a long time, though.
Yeah, but as like the place where all like the smarter money is going to, not like the Dallas of a few years ago.
Yeah. The thing that it brings to mind, though, is like, where do you invest these days? Because everybody says that we're at the top of the market, and mainstream people say it. The Chicken Littles of the world say it. Everybody says we're at the top of the market. So if we're at the top of the market, what's safe harbor? What do you invest in? Like, what are you looking at this point?
I guess, something that cash flows, that's stabilized, right? It's going to cash flow regardless if there's a recession. And then you look for that loan term to be able to outride any kind of recession. So maybe 7 years might be a little too short, but definitely 10 or 12 years will get you through there.
Not just the loan term, though. The one thing that, remember, the things that got people in trouble back in 2008, 2009, even people who were cash flowing, listen, if you're doing single family homes and you've got no loan covenant, a value covenant, loan to value covenant or something like that, then you're fine. You can do whatever as long as you're cash flowing, then you don't care. But in commercial property, you've got not only the cash flow issue, but you've also got typically you're going to have some kind of a loan covenant. And what that means is that the bank was willing to give you a certain amount of leverage, whether that is 75% or 80% leverage. A lot of times with primary markets like Arizona and Texas and Atlanta, you get up to 80% leverage. So if you're taking that full 80% leverage, what you've got to hope is that when there is an appraisal on the property, and typically they're happening, every 18 months or something like that, that cap rates have not decompressed so much that even though you're cash flowing, your loan covenant is no longer valid. In other words, you might be cash flowing, but you may not have a maximum of 80% leverage based on what the appraisal was. Now, you could all of a sudden, because of the value, it could be 85% leverage, right? Does that make sense? And if you do that, that's when you get in trouble in these markets. That's what happens in these markets where all of a sudden, even though you're cash flowing, you get a call from the bank saying, hey, you owe us, $500,000. What do you mean I'm cash flowing? I'm paying on time. Well, we did an appraisal and your property isn't worth as much. That's the real risk in this kind of environment.
Right.
Robert Kiyosaki was telling me a story about how that happened in one of his commercial properties in Phoenix back in 2008. He was cash flowing just fine, and he couldn't figure out, well, why are these guys calling me and asking me for more money? I'm cash flowing like crazy in this thing. Well, that's what it was. So how do you avoid that's the question, right? Because that's the biggest risk in my view. And so looking at properties that cash flow alone is probably, even that is probably just not safe enough right now. I think what you have to look at, first of all, is primary markets for the most part. And the reason I say that is, especially if you're looking at loan to value covenants, typically you're going to get much more leverage in a primary market than you are a secondary, tertiary market. In other words, in a Phoenix, in a Dallas, and in Atlanta, your loan covenant may be that the maximum leverage you get is 80%, right? Whereas, as you know, if you try to buy a property in Oklahoma, a Fannie Mae, debt may only be 70% leverage, right?
So what you're saying is, in tough times, the banks are going to be like, okay, the second tier places, the Oklahomas, the Waco, Texases, we're going to go after. You're going to do appraisal. We're going to go after.
That's not what I'm saying. Right off the bat, if you try to get debt today, the loan covenant typically, okay, say you're going to a Fannie, you're trying to get debt, right? And for passive investors, this is important too, to understand for where you're investing. But say you've got a property and it's in Dallas, or maybe it's in Phoenix, one of these primary markets. Typically, the bank is willing to give you up to 80% leverage on that property, right? If it's not like a D-class property, it's like, maybe it's a B minus, maybe even a C plus property. You get 80%. They'll give you 80% leverage. They said you need 20% equity to take this thing down, right? Now, the challenges in a secondary market, you may get, it may be 70%, et cetera, right?
Mm-hmm.
My big concern is, like, where does the value change so precipitously that you start violating the loan covenant because the appraisal doesn't give you a good number?
Right. No, that makes sense.
So
different ways.
Right. So if you stick to a place like a primary market, first of all, your loan covenant is allowing for you to have all the way, maybe allowing you up to 80% loan to value, right? Not just 70, right?
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. So now you've got an 80% loan to value. So you've got some cushion there. So maybe you're using 72, 73% leverage, but if the market's decompressed and valuations go down, you still got, close to 10% cushion before you get some sort of capital call.
Right.
So that's what you really, that's probably the biggest danger in my view, because the reality is that, like, okay, markets dip, they go in cycles, right? The question is, even if we know that's going to happen. So when it happens, the question is, like, how does that affect me? Well, maybe my cash flow will go down a little bit, but I'm still in a great asset. And when the market turns around, as long as we can keep this property, right?
Right.
Go back because of a loan covenant, then you'll be fine. And in my opinion, this is where a lot of syndicators who are relatively inexperienced and going after a lot right now, this is where people potentially could get in trouble, because there's a couple of different ways that you can safeguard yourself against this kind of a problem as a passive investor. First of all, try to figure out how much leverage is being taken out, and to figure out what the covenant is, right? Make sure that there's some cushion there. Second of all, I wouldn't touch anything that wasn't really value add, because if you can drive net operating income up, that's going to also help you to make sure that your value of your property comes out in such a way that it's going to, again, decrease the risk of you violating your loan covenant.
Right. And you can ask that by asking, well, what's the rehab per unit? Usually anything less than $3,000 per unit is kind of
Or
just
you can just
lipstick
say
on a pig.
or you can just say, what's your loan covenant? I mean, with Fannie Mae, what kind of loan are you getting with Fannie Mae? You know, this group that, I've been working with, no, I won't even say their name, but they actually are one of the few groups in the country that's given out 100% loan to value. They don't take it, but that's what they're given.
Right.
So that makes things a little safer.
Right. And that's when you're doing the super high value add,
Massive value.
$10,000 per
Right.
unit or more.
Yeah. Massive value add plays. Right.
Right. Let's see what Robbie's going to say.
I really enjoy listening to your podcasts on a regular basis. And the most recent podcast that I listened to was regarding the raw land opportunity. I was wondering if you had the opportunity yourself to look into that. I think it was Mark Podolsky of Land Geek podcast was talking about some opportunities there, and I didn't know if you took advantage of that opportunity. I'd love to learn about that more if you've had any experience from that.
Yeah, question. Great question. I'm getting a lot of that question. And first of all, let me just say this, is that when so Mark Podolsky was on the show it was a few weeks ago. Have you had him on your show, Lane?
Yeah, I think about a year ago, I think. I mean, I like the idea, right? Like, it's all about automation.
Yeah, I mean, so effectively, the business model is that, you, how do you cash flow with land? It almost sounds like doesn't make sense, right? But really what it is trying to find land at a good price and then seller financing it to somebody for a lot more money. And in a lot of cases, whatever you paid for it, potentially you can have that as a down payment. Then it takes your risk off the table. The rest of it is infinite return.
Or selling it really quickly, and then you just get that velocity of money.
Right. Or you could do that, right? You could either flip, or you could flip land too, in which case, the returns can be pretty high. So I'm glad you asked the question when you did, because so when I heard this show, I was before I met Mark, I'd heard about this and I was like, yeah, and it sounds a little bit too good to be true, and that's why I wanted to have him on and just kind of talk about this, a new concept. And then, but Mark, when I got sort of talking to him even before we podcast, and I realized he's a smart guy. I mean, he's like a ex-banker. He's a finance guy. He's not, hey man, let's make some money kind of guy,
Not a newscaster.
Right. Well, that's another story altogether. Right. But he told me how it worked. Now that was pretty interesting. And I was like, I still don't know this guy very well. Maybe I will, maybe I'll just kind of, maybe I'll sign up and be a guinea pig. But I didn't end up doing that because I decided I wanted to get a little bit deeper in notes, and I don't want to get derailed by another shiny object. In the meantime, I've now talked to two people who independently, not as referrals from Mark, have gone into this course and ended up making money. So they're making money. That's a pretty good indication. One of the guys I actually interviewed on the show, a few weeks ago, it might have been even the last show that we played. I don't know when this one's going out, but, and we're not talking about massive amounts of effort. I mean, these guys put in some work. They tried hard. They kind of bootstrapped it. They probably did it, even without going into the highest level product, and they were actually cash flowing. So as to whether I have personal experience, the answer is no, but I can tell you that there's at least two people I know who've done the program, who at varying levels. One guy did the absolute basic one, in which I can't imagine how you would, how long it would take to, actually learn that part of it. But they're both making money. I have not heard of anybody, and not that there isn't, but I haven't heard anybody complain about it, which is a really good thing. Because usually, when I have somebody on the show and somebody talks about a product, I get somebody, emailing me and saying, that's a bunch of BS. Now, Mark is a good salesman, but on the other hand, what I will say is that any product like this is going to require effort. So I know at least 2 people who've made money. That means money can be made. It doesn't mean that you will make money, right? So that's what I'll leave you with. I will, and one final plug on that, because I've had at least 2 people say good things about this. I put an affiliate link to Mark's program on my website. I've not had an affiliate link for a product before, so that's saying something. So if you're going to do it, at least use my affiliate link. So Mark pays me whatever, like, $10 of whatever he gets from you. So
Right.
on wealthformula.com. So yeah. Any other comments on that, Lane?
Yeah, I mean, for people who don't really know what it is, I mean, basically you're buying land, and the people who have land to sell are extremely unsophisticated. I mean, a lot of these guys don't even use the internet. So that's inherently why you're picking up these properties at a good value, and you're kind of using the internet, like Facebook ads and Facebook Marketplace, to sell off the land to the neighbors. It's kind of the gist of it. Of course, it's very complicated, but I think you'd probably say, Buck, this is more an active role.
There's no question. This is a hustle. So this is important because Lane is also a member of Wealth Formula Network, which I'll love to get your comments on in a few minutes. But it's our forum, which people who have gotten into the course and who are doing this are part of our forum, and then we have biweekly calls. And one of the sections in there, in the forum, we're reviewing basically, or getting people's experiences on what I call side hustles, because this isn't investing. Okay, that's the key here. I mean, the Land Geek stuff, Mark stuff is not investing. It's a business opportunity is what it is. Because it's not going to be easy. Maybe you can automate a bunch of it, but you're going to have to learn a lot about it. You're going to have to put a little capital up. You're going to need to spend a little bit of time. But, the returns that people are getting are business level returns, right? They're a lot more than you would get from investing, in a good piece of cash flowing real estate. So it's definitely a side hustle.
Right. And I think, we're both one, right? We're ex-professionals. I'm still working a day job, but you have this entrepreneur itch that you're trying to scratch. I mean, if you're going to do it for that. But for a lot of the folks listening, probably, stay at your day job. That's probably your highest and best use.
Maybe. I think, though, the people that I talk to do have day jobs, and they're still making it happen. I would say if you are willing to commit, literally, really commit 4 or 5 hours a week to something just to do as a side hustle, then do it. It'll make you more money. If you do it right, you'll make more money than driving for Uber 4 or 5 hours a week. How's that Uber going for you, by the way? I'm just kidding.
No. I mean, there was that somebody said they could sell their testicle for $35,000 in there, but that's another way of making money.
Yeah, but they only offered you 20, right? Isn't that?
Wow. No. Mine was not for sale.
Anyway,
that's 2 turnkey rentals right there.
But to the extent that this guy, one of the guys who was telling me about it, I think his total return was, what he had done was he'd made all this money that he invested back in the first year with the amount of money he made. So the returns can be really high, but that's what you would expect with a business. I mean, you don't work your tail off for 12% cash on cash. Yeah.
And, there's a lot of these groups, right? Like there's mobile home investing, of obviously the plethora of apartment investing groups. You're doing the note stuff. And there's these 2 tiers, right? The $25,000 plus tier of mentorship, and then the cheapo version, the $5,000 less. You get the video sets and stuff like that. What's your kind of thoughts if someone is just going to put in 4 hours a week and kind of dive in halfway?
I think
do the big one, or
it's my nature is always to do the big one, right? And I won't. Well, I'll talk about what I'm doing right now some other time when I have some more experience with it. But suffice it to say, it was 40 grand for me to get in to do this. And the reason I do that is I don't see these things as expenses. I see them as investments. Like I said, last year I think I spent somewhere about $100,000 between masterminds and educational events, but it'll end up producing 7 figures. So it's a 10x investment. And it's not with necessarily information either, Lane. You have to look at it from multiple of areas, right? A lot of it is just people I met because I was part of a group. And that alone is like, that's hard to quantify. But if you find somebody that you do business with because of a group, and the next thing you know, you've made $500,000 because of it. I mean, it has to track back to what you initially did. So anyway, the reason I pay most of the time, though, is because I'm a big believer in saving time. And I always find that if you pay the top level, you get handheld more, you get all of the trade secrets up front without having to ask. That's what I do. But in this case, I don't think that that's necessarily, Mark doesn't push it either. I think, there are some people in our own Wealth Formula Network who are doing it now, who did pay the top level tiers for that. And we'll see how it goes. We'll even talk about it. So, but I think really these things should be seen as investments. And if you're not seeing them as investments, you're not thinking of the world the right way. Let's look at my mastermind right now, right? I mean, damn, $25,000 a month. Screw that. I'm $197 a month, right? that's pretty cheap with the course and everything. But it's, again, I think that most people who are in it, who are part of Wealth Formula Network and have taken the course, your roadmap to real wealth would tell you that it's more than just the course. It's the community, it's the biweekly calls, it's everything involved. So, but yeah, I mean, I think for me personally, I always go for the highest level deal just because I'm afraid of missing out on something. And I want to compress time as much as possible.
Go big or go home, right?
That's my philosophy.
All right, let's queue up this other question from Mr. Chris here.
Oh, hi, Buck. My name's Chris Eggleston. I'm a young engineer in the South Bay here in
listening to you.
Hawthorne. Right now I'm in Redondo Beach. It's a beautiful day. Brand new into investing. Looking at my first investment real estate purchases here in the coming months. And you said in one of your podcasts, actually, with Kevin Buff, I just listened to it and heard about your website. And you said your network is your net worth. So my question is, how do I get connected here in the South Bay? I've seen tools like Meetup, and I'm, actively subscribing and looking into the next couple of weeks what's on the agenda with some of the investment groups nearby. But what would you recommend as far as, like you said, not just reading books, but surrounding yourself with a successful team and maybe finding some mentors that have already done something like this? Anyways, hope you're having a great day, and thank you so much for your time. I look forward to hearing back. Talk to you later on. Bye-bye.
Well, I mean, for what? Well, thanks for the question. The first question is, where do you find them? I mean, and I hate to keep plugging this, but Wealth Formula Network is made exactly for that purpose, is so that you get a lot of people of like mind, even the course itself has got a lot of my personal advisors, but then you get inside the course and then you have other people who are part of this whole Wealth Formula Network in the mastermind. Now, a lot of ways that the best way to get referrals, to get hooked up, ultimately is just through other people's contacts. It's a different kind of leverage. We talk about other people's money all the time, right? But it's other people's contacts as well. It's if Lane for example, if Lane frequently will, if he has a question or if he finds out there's an opportunity, he'll say, hey, do you know this guy? And if I do, I'll say, yeah, I like the guy, or no, I don't I don't know the guy, or yeah, but I don't like the guy, or something like that. And so that's basically kind of, it's as simple as that, really, right? Now, I will say the problem that you'll have when you go to like real estate, these RIAs and other types of local groups, it sort of depends what you're trying to do, right? If you're out there trying to find investors, for example, the absolute wrong place to be is in a RIA, because everybody in the group there is trying to find investors. There's nobody actually trying to invest their money. If you're trying to find other people who are just generally interested in real estate, it might be worth it. But again, in my experience, a lot of the times, a lot of these groups are just people who are interested in learning and they don't know any more than you. But I will defer to another engineer here, because I think he's closer to what you're talking about in terms of this world. And in fact, you probably should listen to Lane's podcast, because this is kind of right up your alley, right, Lane?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking this is kind of my avatar right here, the guy who makes like 150,000 a year, net worth under 200 grand. I mean, first question was, where do you go? Buck doesn't go to these RIAs anymore. I mean, I used to go to them, and I think they're kind of a waste of time now. I mean, you have to surround yourself with similar people with similar pedigrees. A lot of the people that go to these groups, a lot of them don't have college degrees, and not saying that nothing's wrong with that, right? But they just have a different, they don't have money. They got a lot of time, and you're kind of the opposite of that. So, find the room with people like you, but a few years ahead of you. And that was kind of because I stumbled upon, I grew up with doctors, lawyers, engineers that were a little bit further ahead of me. So I kind of tagged along with them.
Yeah, it's a challenge, though. I think, especially when you're young and you're eager, and maybe you just read Kiyosaki's book and you want to go out there and do something. It's like you get super excited. That's like the classic thing, right? You read Cash Flow Quadrant or Rich Dad Poor Dad, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to invest in real estate and become a millionaire, right? And then the problem is, then you're like, okay, now where do I start? If you're like me, you go ahead and start, and then you end up getting burned badly in your first deal, and you learn a lot. But I think the answer to that is it's probably not necessarily in your RIA. You also have to make a decision at some point, I think relatively early in your professional career, of whether you're planning on being, what is it that you like about real estate? What is it that you like about investing in real estate, right? I think a lot of people confuse liking real estate with simply investing in real estate, because at the end of the day, is it that you just like the buildings, or do you like what the actual assets do for you? If it's more what the assets do for you, then you really, if you've got a full-time job and you're not really thinking that, you're going to go full-time into real estate someday, you really ought to be focusing your time trying to, learn who to invest with. Now, if you're not accredited, there's still, I think sometimes there's some syndications. And Lane, you don't always you're raising money sometimes for non-accredited people too, if they get to know you, right?
Right.
So there are opportunities there. I mean, I'm not really so much into the turnkey world, but that's another opportunity as well, where you don't have to be an operator. Getting involved with notes funds, American Homeowner Preservation, certainly, I don't know that they're open, but there's another way to just create cash flow. And first and foremost, be honest with yourself. Are you inspired by cash flow or the concept of being in real estate? Do you just like hearing about this stuff, but the idea of, tenants, termites, and toilets actually doesn't appeal to you. You know what? It doesn't really appeal to me. I like what real estate does for me. And so I try to stay on a high level on this stuff. And I think, Lane, you've kind of gone through that transformation as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, there's a point where I think we call the critical mass point, when your investments are sort of making enough that you can sort of sustain the minimal bare necessities. And I think if you're before that, you got to go out and get your hands dirty a little bit, or do like a turnkey rental or something like that. You're going to get higher returns, a lot more headaches, but that's how you build up your equity to get over that critical mass point. And it's different for everybody.
Yeah. And, at the end of the day, I think you really got to figure out, again, going back to this point of what is it that you really want to do, unless you're like completely in love with real estate. There's no real point in becoming an active, operator in there and trying to network with people for that purpose. It just, so Lane, I go to the Montecito YMCA every day and do the elliptical, and I'm there usually, I'm there early, and it's about, so everybody else there is at least 75 years old. So I feel young and virile when I'm there. So that's one of the reasons I go there. But I listen to books and sometimes podcasts, but usually just books these days. And I started listening to, again, for probably the 10th time, Think and Grow Rich. And it was like the first chapter, again, where he talks about this guy who, Barnes, who said he really wanted to work with Edison, and he made it happen. He wanted to become an associate with Thomas Edison. But one of the first lessons in there for the idea, and this is an incredibly powerful book, by the way. If you have not read Think and Grow Rich, you really should. No matter who you are, you really should, because I think it is probably the most ripped off self-help book on the face of the earth.
Right. Everybody, Tony Robbins, all the Jim Rohn is all just ripped off.
Everybody. Just the same concepts come from this book that was written 80 years ago. Right. But one of the stories that I was thinking about there was one of the first rules he had was, and this goes back to the law of attraction, and you have to think about what you want, and thoughts become reality and all this stuff. But he takes it to another level. He says that really you got to just want it so badly that you're willing to burn the ships. Right? So you really, really, you want it so badly, you want to burn, that you're willing to burn the ships. In other words, if you want it that badly, if you want to be a full-time, real estate operator, then it's time for a career change. And are you willing to do that? If you are, good, more power to you. More power to you. But I think that that's a decision that you got to make. And that's most people that I talk to, and most people who listen to this show who are interested in investing, want to know how to take the wealth that they are, or take the money that they're making, the mass that they're creating at their day jobs, and amplify it vis-a-vis investing in a smart way. You don't have to burn the ships for that.
You already got a yacht.
Yeah.
Essentially, right?
You already got something that you're pretty happy with. You're just trying to upgrade.
Yeah.
Right?
I think homeboy Chris here is a little bit, he's got a little rowboat. I think that's kind of the situation he's in. He's starting out. So he's got to probably get a little active, and that might be, doesn't mean he needs to flip houses or wholesale, but, because he seems like he has a decent job, but maybe, do a little turnkey, play general operator for a little bit, but then once he gets that yacht, kind of just be smart about it.
Yeah, because the other issue is that, and we've talked about this before, Lane, too, because I think you had a point where I think you had like 12, you had like 12 houses and stuff, right? 12 single family houses. And you're like, it's actually a lot of work to have 12 single family houses, right?
Right.
Probably a lot more work than it would, than to have, to be invested in a 200 unit apartment building.
Right. And then, and then I went to, and I did
Right.
the apartment mentorship route, I went big, like how you said, just pay the 25 grand. But then I got 18 months into it and I was like, what the heck am I doing? Like, I don't need, I'm lucky enough that I started early. Like, what do I need? Like to be a general partner and
You were in
operator.
North Korea for a while. I heard.
What do I need to do that? I can just get my, 15, 20% a year. And then I got my yacht in a way. I mean, it's not that
Everybody
nice
needs to go through their evolution and figure that out. And if something really does give you that insatiable desire to burn the boats, then burn the boats. Otherwise, now you know enough, and now you can go back and figure out, how can I do this in a way where I don't have to, I can keep my day job but reap all the benefits of real estate.
Right. And for guys like, Chris and maybe a little more experience, who have a few more houses under their belt, I've got like this 2-part test. And I always say, first of all, are you good at being an operator? And that's kind of a loaded question, because you don't know, you don't have the self-awareness to know that you kind of suck at being an operator. Right. And then the second question is, do you enjoy doing it? Like, because you're going to be financially free in 3 to 7 years. Like you say, begin with the end in mind and do something you enjoy. Don't just be a multifamily classy operator because it's cool.
Yeah. Right. So you're part of, Lane, you're part of this thing, this Wealth Formula Network thing I'm doing. What do you like about it? Topics and things that we've done. Has it been, again, I'm not doing this just to plug, I'm just curious.
Yeah. So, how you talk about your gym, my gym is kind of the opposite. I go to the gym that has it's Iron Fitness Hawaii here.
Oh yeah.
It's like a shop. It's bodybuilders, they'll drop their trunks and pose in front of the mirror because they've got a competition coming up. Like, it's one of those places where I'm like the absolutely most out of shape person in there. And that's kind of like, it actually works, because I'm like, man, gotta do a few more reps in here, instead of just hanging out with the octogenarians, listen to Think and Grow Rich. But that's kind of like
that's my life right there.
I think you got to push it a little bit more,
I push in I have different talents. So
yeah,
I have a different set of talents.
Low impact sports like swimming, right?
Yeah, I tried. Well, I've had back surgery 3 times, and I wish I could be more active. But yeah. So what were you saying?
But yeah, like a guy like Chris, I think, I don't know if, I think he would benefit for being in a group like what you got going. Some of the topics are just really cool and off the wall. What was that monetary installment loan? Like, I don't even know. It's like equity stripping, but with businesses.
Well, yeah. So, that's just like the standard, that standard issue for that group is we've got content on there that, sometimes we don't have on the podcast because it's really applying, it's so specific. But in that case, it was like it was an alternative to a 1031 exchange that basically allows you to defer taxes on a big capital gain up to 30 years, and take 93% up front.
Right.
But yeah,
and what I like about it is that,
and we talked about Ponzi schemes that we know of, right? We exposed some Ponzi schemes,
right? Who are some bad characters out there that people have worked with. What I really like about it is, you've got all these topics that it's impossible to write a blog article. I don't think you could even do a podcast or a webinar. It needs to be more of an interactive call format. And what is it, bi-weekly or monthly or something?
Well, we do bi-weekly calls. We're trying to get more and more people to actually participate in the forums. But, now I'm putting new content in the forums too. Like, for example, that, the monetized installment sale. I basically put that in the forum as new content. And then we have some crypto content in there.
Right. I guess what I like about it is like the wealth formula banking thing. It's there in that webinar format, but you've got actually 4 or 5 people on the line, and they kind of say how they're using it, because every situation is different.
Right. Yeah, and actually, that I'm learning stuff from that too. I think Jerry, who's in our group, who's awesome. Hey, Jerry, he had this cool technique where sometimes people get these wealth formula, these insurance products that are theoretically could be used like wealth formula banking, but they're not structured nearly as favorably. So they're, for example, their cash, they don't accumulate as much cash, and then their borrowing interest is way higher than it would be from the carriers that we use. And so Jerry actually figured out a way, like a third-party lender that would that would lend at a low rate, so that people who had like policies like these, but maybe they were through Northwestern Mutual or something like that, could do the same thing without having to. He's owned these policies for 20 years. It doesn't make any sense for him to go back and redo them. So those kinds of things, it's like, they don't come up. They're hard to just make an entire show about them, but there are these little snippets, and then we know exactly who to go to, the vendor or the bank, the person. So that's kind of neat. But yeah. So anything else you have to add today, Lane? I know you got to probably do whatever you do, but
yeah, I got to go back. Well, I think I'm just going to call in sick the rest of the day. I got a doctor's appointment. So
yeah. Well, I think your boss listens to the show, and so
yeah.
Well, listen, Lane, thanks for being on, and thanks for the questions. We only had a couple, but I think we got through some good material here. Lane, once again, the show is, and I always let you say it because I always mess up the name for some reason.
Simple Passive Cash Flow.
Simple Passive Cash Flow. Check it out. Lane Kawaoka, one of my first guests on my show, and I think I was one of the first guests on your shows too. So we go way back, at least a year and a half.
Yeah, 100 or so episodes ago.
Yeah. All right, man. Thanks again.
All right. Talk to you later, bud.
All right. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show, everyone. I wanted to remind you, by the way, that you can participate in the next Ask Buck show. All you need to do is go to wealthformula.com, and you can go and speak pipe, and you can leave your question. Now, the other thing you can do, I forgot to mention in the intro, is we have an app. It's a Wealth Formula app. It's really easy to get the show from there, get all the notifications, and you can actually leave a video question, and you can use it just the way speak pipe. If we have something on there, we'll play it just the same. So if that's easier, do that. Well, definitely you should download that app though, because it's super cool, and you can do fun stuff with it. Speaking of the app, the other thing on that app is quick and easy access to the Wealth Formula Network, which is my inner community, my private community, my forum. And that, of course, comes along with this course that has the likes of Tom Wheelwright, Kevin Day, Ken McElroy, the real estate guys, etc. And if you want to check that out, I mean, it is a bargain, and I would love to have you part of our community. We also have biweekly phone calls, which are a real hit. Check that out at wealthformularoadmap.com. And with that, I will leave you for the week. This is Buck Joffrey signing off.